Hi, this is Magda from Wnętrza Zewnętrza. In this episode, I'll take you to a 66 square meter apartment that was arranged by the owner herself, without working with a designer. The idea was not only to make it look nice, but also practical, so that everything has its place and it's easy to clean. And on top of that, to stay within the budget. How did it turn out? You'll see in a moment. As usual, we start at the entrance, and right here we have hooks for jackets, a shelf for shoes, and you can see that if the door were closer to the corner, these things just wouldn't fit here. When evaluating rooms, always look not only at the square footage, but also at the placement of windows and doors, because when they're close to the corners, they significantly reduce how you can arrange things. And now take a look at what's next here. We have the entrance to the bathroom here, the bedroom and the office, and we'll take a look at them later. On this side, there's a wide passage to the living room with the kitchen, and here I'd like to draw your attention to this space, which made it possible to create spacious closets that hold a lot of things and are easily accessible. And sometimes when choosing an apartment, we want to minimize the hallway space as much as possible. And yes, in that case, there is less space for the hallway, but we can't use it for storage like we can here, so it's not always the best strategy. And here we have a bench, right by the entrance, where you can sit comfortably, and interestingly, the panels were custom made. The owner wrote to the seller on Allegro, telling him the dimensions of this space, and he suggested adjusting the panels so that they would perfectly fill this area. Next, there is a large wardrobe for clothes. There are both coats and dresses here, and at the bottom there are pull-out shelves for shoes. At the end, there's a pantry, a storage space for various things, not just kitchen items, although those too, and on this side a great utility closet, which is deeper than standard because of the wall layout, so it fills the space perfectly evenly, and as you can see, it works great. There's a pull-out system from IKEA here, and a designated spot for tall items like a drying rack, but to make the most of this space, a shelf unit was also added in the end. There's also plenty of storage space in the living room, with modular cabinets placed and hung here, and the initial plan was for all of them to have doors. However, it turned out that the books look so beautiful that it's a shame to hide them, even behind a glass door. And by the way, we have a nice combination here, because on one side there are open shelves, and on the other side there are glass-fronted and completely closed shelves where we can hide the things we don't want to display. That's the advantage of modular furniture. You can spread out your purchasing decisions over time. You can start with a basic setup and then see what else you actually need and buy the remaining elements later, unless, of course, the series unfortunately gets discontinued in the meantime. And theoretically, custom-made furniture or furniture from a carpenter can also be divided. You can order part of it first and then order more later. However, first of all, it takes longer, and secondly, carpenters don't always want to take on small jobs, and ordering a single front can be a problem. It's worth keeping this strategy in mind in general when buying all the furniture for your apartment. At first, maybe one dresser will be enough, and then you'll see if you need a second one, or maybe a bigger wardrobe, or perhaps some other drawers. We don't have to have everything right away. For example, the decision to buy this armchair was made a year after moving in, and not only did it bring a lot of joy because of the new purchase, but it also brought a breath of fresh air to the apartment's decor. It's nice to change something in your home from time to time. As for the armchair itself, I'll show you the whole thing. It looks like an old armchair from the communist era, but it's actually a new piece of furniture. And the manufacturer gave the option to choose the color of the wood finish and the upholstery, so it could be highly personalized. What's important is that you usually have to wait longer for such personalized furniture, and sometimes that's frustrating because we want it as soon as possible, but it's worth appreciating because in reality it's a very sustainable way of making our purchases when they're made to order. Exactly when we need certain things and not in excess, like it is with most clothes, for example. At first, there was a grey sofa in the living room, but only for a short while. It was later moved to the study, and in its place from the beginning, this beautiful navy blue sofa from Befame was ordered, which you might also know under the name Beskidzki Fabryki Mebli. And honestly, a few years ago, I came across possibly even the same model at the Warsaw Home Fair, and I was really impressed by it. As it turns out, it also works great in practice. It's very high quality, so we can be proud that such wonderful furniture is made in our country. And here we have an example of an interesting solution because the sides of the sofa are movable, so we can arrange them in different ways to change the look of the sofa. However, when guests don't expect it and just want to lean on it, they might get a little scared, thinking the sofa has broken. In the dining area, there's a large 2-meter table which can also be extended. And on both sides, it has these pull-out supports where you can place tabletops, extending the table by almost another meter. However, I'd like to draw your attention to the chairs, which have a beautiful design and armrests. However, these armrests are low enough that the chairs fit under the table. If they were higher and you couldn't slide the chairs in, the whole setup would take up much more space and there wouldn't be such an easy passage next to the table. In the kitchen, there are different cabinet fronts on the bottom and different ones on the top. On the bottom, there's a natural oak color, and on the top, glossy white. However, the countertop has an interesting texture, and the same material with the same texture, just in a different color, was also used on the wall. Now let's take a look at how the cabinets have been organized. The upper ones are simply shelves, but notice the little basket, which comes in handy when there's a large distance between the shelves, allowing us to make better use of the space in the cabinet. Sometimes we need to store tall items like a jug, and the distance between the shelves just has to be large enough to fit such things. But we don't always fill the whole shelf with tall accessories, so in that case, a little basket like this can be a really good choice. Down here we have drawers. There are also hidden drawers inside them, so we have plenty of storage space. Everything is easily accessible. Here the spices are beautifully displayed. Look at the leaves and allspice berries in these little jars. It all looks amazing, but we're closing now. Next we have the oven, and there's also a drawer underneath it. Here we have a corner cabinet with pull-out shelves and racks for lids and pans. This way, everything stays organized and it's easy to reach for anything. And importantly, the pans don't get scratched, because when you stack them inside each other, unfortunately, the surface can get a bit damaged. Next, we have the dishwasher, and under the sink, 2 drawers, one for household items and the other below for bins. There's a push-to-open feature, but it's not an electric system, it's mechanical. And here at the end is the refrigerator, and then we can move on to the next rooms. In the study, right by the entrance, there's a closet, as well as a modular piece of furniture, and importantly, it has easily accessible drawers. Next, we have the sofa I already mentioned to you, and thanks to it, this room can also serve as a guest room. And here we have furniture from the previous apartment, which eventually won't be here, and a set bought on Allegro. The desk was placed by the corner window, which not only looks beautiful, but also allows you to take breaks from work and sometimes look into the distance, which is good for our eyes and lets them rest. And of course, you might say that having a monitor by the window isn't the best combination, but here it's the north wall of the building. So first of all, there isn't that much sunlight, and secondly, there are pleated blinds on the windows, so we can adjust them so that the sun's rays don't interfere with work. In in the bedroom, there's a bed brought from the previous apartment, which will be replaced with a bigger, upholstered one. But as I mentioned before, there's no need to rush with such changes. However, when those changes do happen, the nightstands will also be replaced with hanging shelves, so the vacuum cleaner can easily move underneath them, and at the same time, the outlets will be moved higher to make them more accessible. On this side, there's a custom-made wardrobe with sliding doors, because when the bigger bed is in place, there will be less space, and regular doors wouldn't be as convenient. And here, in two sections, there are shelves and drawers at the bottom, and at the end there are two rods for hanging clothes. Since there isn't much space between them, dresses hang together with jackets and coats in the hallway. This blanket with birds with conures is a souvenir from a trip to Iceland. It was made from the wool of local sheep, and I think it will last for many years. When choosing souvenirs, sometimes it's better to buy fewer things, but something more solid and practical that will serve us for many years, rather than those cheaper trinkets that are often made in China and don't really have much to do with local souvenirs. In the bathroom, my attention was drawn to the wall cabinet with a drawer. It's true that it's not as high as the hanging cabinets in the kitchen, where sometimes there are drawers too, and then it's really uncomfortable to use them unless you're 2 meters tall. Here, however, the drawer is lower. It's also easily accessible from the side, and it's simply a place for the hairdryer, so it's easy to reach for it. Here, however, on the shelf, there's a toilet paper holder in the shape of a sheep. As the toilet paper runs out, the sheep gets thinner and reminds us to restock it. A very cute idea. And since we're talking about decorations and interior design, take a look at the walls, which are blue. All the tiles in the bathroom are white, and this color appears here as paint on the wall, so if we wanted to change the decor, we could just buy a small can and repaint it ourselves in a few hours. The washing machine door collides with the toilet, but that's not really a problem here, it's still easy to access. However, if you happen to buy a washing machine that opens the other way, which is rare but still possible, the problem would be much bigger if the washing machine door only opened this far. Not only does it hit the walls, but it's also really narrow. It would be very difficult to use in that case, so pay attention to these kinds of details. And just like it's hard to accidentally buy a washing machine that opens to the right,
because really,
there are very few of those models. However, it might be the case that in another bathroom, the situation would be the opposite. And that's exactly why you would need to buy a washing machine that opens to the right, so you can use it comfortably. On this side, there's a bathtub with a rain shower and a sliding glass panel, so you can take a relaxing bath or a quick shower. However, what didn't work out, unfortunately, was the black fixtures. The paint is coming off, which doesn't look nice, and on top of that, the exposed faucet is especially problematic to clean. Finding the right faucet, one that's low enough above the bathtub, while the rain shower is high enough to stand under, and is black, exposed, and preferably with a thermostat, turned out to be a very, very difficult challenge, and in the end, we had to give up on the thermostat. Cosmetics are poured into identical containers, so there's no problem with those packaging labels that ruin the look of the bathroom. The budget for finishing this apartment in 2020 was 100,000 zlotys. To stay within this amount, the owner chose a very good strategy. She decided to buy a good quality floor and doors, things that are harder to replace in the future. The key wardrobes were also custom made. Most of the remaining furnishings are from chain stores and from her previous apartment. And by doing some of the work herself, she was also able to save on labor costs. This combination made it possible to stay within the budget and leaves room for easily making any changes or improvements in the future. That's all for this video. So now I'm waiting for your comments, likes, and I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. You can find over 300 interior design videos on wnetrzazewnetrza, so if you're looking for inspiration, you're in the right place. And be sure to check out the offer in our store at wnetrzazewnetrza.pl. Now I'm saying goodbye and see you next time. Bye bye. Thank you.